Hi there, I'm Daniel Joseph. Thanks for coming again to our video session talking about the issues that really matter to Kelowna residents. You guys know me, I'm the Dairy Queen guy. I'm also an entrepreneur and resident here and trying to fight for the community and for what people have been talking to me about. And I'm sitting here with Charlie Hodge. Charlie, would you introduce yourself?
Like I said, Daniel, you just did. Yeah, City Councilor, my third term. I'm hoping to sit for the fourth in Kelowna. I was also on Vancouver Island City Council in Parksville, so this will be my fifth term as an elected official if I'm lucky enough to be blessed by your vote.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. And again, thanks for having us here. And
My pleasure.
you know what? Actually, I want to tell you. So I first heard of you from one of my coworkers. This is years ago. This is when I first moved to Kelowna. Lee Manchester. Do you remember Lee? Do you know
Sure
Lee?
do.
Yeah.
Wonderful young man.
He is. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And so because I learned of you from him, that's when I started kind of, trying to figure out who you were and following you a little bit. So it's actually been it's an honor to sit here with you and talk about the city and the issues that we're facing. So thank you. And because you are an incumbent councillor, I'm going to be asking you a little harder questions and jump right into it. Perfect. So the first thing I want to touch on, and I know there's a host of issues that we could talk about, but the first thing I'm going to talk about is affordability and homelessness.
Okay.
And I want to actually lead that into talking about the rail trail and the City of Kelowna's involvement on the rail trail. But I won't start with the rail trail. I'll actually start on affordability.
Okay.
And the reason why I want to do that is because I truly believe that homelessness, one of the major precursors is that a lot of people are getting priced out of the market right now. There are people I'm talking to, I'm from Rutland, and I've got a lot of neighbors, or a lot of people in our neighborhood that I talk to who I'm friends with, where they're one paycheck away from losing everything and from being put on the streets themselves. And so when we talk about homelessness, I know there's a host of other issues that we're going to have to deal with, but just pricing and affordability here in City of Kelowna over the last 4 years, it's been skyrocketing out of control, in my opinion, and in the opinions of a lot of the people I've been talking to. And one of the ways, I know it's a really hard topic. One of the ways that I've been, dealing with residents and some other pundits on talking about is the way we do our zoning. And I don't want to get too deep into the specifics of zoning, but one of the things that the City of Kelowna did is they have done this broad zoning program where single-family homes can turn into fourplexes. And in paper that looks great because you're getting from one house to four units. But in reality and practice, especially, there's this one place where I used to live in the Mission where pretty much where they did this zoning, but all of these houses already had 3 to 4 units of housing because it's a single family home with a carriage home. And then that's already 3 units being rented out, your main, your basement, and your carriage home. And some of them even were pushing the limits and had more people. And so what ended up happening is with this new zone, with the broad fourplex zoning, some of these houses were torn down and they built fourplexes, and that increased the property prices and it increased the rental prices, and in some cases for the basement suites that doubled the rent for those people. For the main or the carriage home, you saw a 40 to 60% increase on rent. And it did not make a meaningful impact on inventory because all of these houses that were being redone as fourplexes already had 3 to 4 units of inventory right there. So what I would want to, bring to debate to City Hall and have this conversation, and you're an incumbent, so you'd be able to speak to it a little bit, is why should we not take a look at where we've done this, where we've already determined in the OCP we want densification, where we've done this broad RU7 zoning. Should we not be having a more involved City Hall where instead of doing fourplexes, we should be looking at low to mid-rise housing, where we could get 20 units a lot rather than 4. We could get 20 to 40 units a lot depending on how high we go, and I think Rutland is a great example of seeing a lot of this low to mid-rise, and that's what kept Rutland affordable for a very long time, in my opinion, is if you walk around Rutland, you'll see a lot of low to mid-rise. They're 2 to 3 stories, so it keeps it keeps a nice walkable community without these tall heights, and it creates affordable inventory. So what do you think about that, just right off the bat, zoning and how that is affecting affordability in Kelowna?
Wow.
Yeah, I know, that's a big one,
What do I
sorry.
think about that? Well, let's see, where to begin with that one. First of all, I don't believe in the term affordable housing. I think it's a joke. I call it diversified housing.
Yep.
That's the term we use at the regional district now. And what I mean by that is diversified housing means is affordable to who? You know, on what income? Nothing's affordable in Kelowna, or very little. But what we need is a diversified amount of housing. Bachelor suites, single suites, low rentals, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, family size. And we need them at different price ranges. We are doing the infill, I think, Daniel, when it comes right down to it. That's part of what the hubs, the urban centers are, and the hub centers are, is to try and consolidate people into an area so that they can provide all the amenities for where they're living.
Yeah, they're like a walkable neighborhood,
exactly. And I think if you look, my concern really, to be honest with you, to some degree, is I'm concerned that we're creating too many bachelor suites and micro suites and 1 bedrooms that eventually, if we continue to build in the amount we are, we're gonna wind up with a bunch of empty buildings.
No, and I agree, and I don't want to see that.
So let me finish.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Kelowna has always been a ridiculously expensive place to live. It never will change, Daniel. This is one of those places that people want to come and live in. People with money and wealthy people and retired people come to Kelowna. That is the reality of it. Whether we like it or not, that's the reality of it. So to try and find housing for all here is more difficult than many other cities, simply because there's so many people and developers and that are taking advantage of the fact that there's a wealthy retired people who are coming here. The market they're building is not for low income. They're building towards people that are going to spend the money. So that's part of the problem right off the bat. Is you have to get a headset around here. We have incentive programs. We have been looking for grants. We have a number of facilities now, if you look at what's been going on the last year and a half, where we're only letting rental only. You know, buildings, developers are coming to us and saying, we want rental only. We don't want, so that people can afford to have a place to live. Because the majority of people that are homeless likely never going to be able to afford to own a home. They're going to need to rent. Most people I know, myself included, I never had the ability to own a home until I was 50. And I've nearly lost it a couple times just because of how hard it is to survive today. So I think that the answer to it really, Daniel, comes down to creating. I mean, I don't disagree that we need to have more info. I totally agree with that, but we have to make sure that we have a diverse amount of housing for people. Just because people don't have a lot of money doesn't mean they don't have families. Where do you put a low-income family of 3? In a single room, you can't. And it's all part of that spin. People have to have a home to have a job.
Yep.
I know that. You gotta have a place to go and clean up and feel good about yourself. It's all part of that healing and that, getting out there and creating. So it's one big circle.
It is.
And if you haven't got a home, you haven't got much to go with. And so we have to find a way, and I think we've actually done with the Journey Home program and Society of Hope, BC Housing. We've worked very hard, as far as I'm concerned, to attempt to resolve the homelessness problem. I don't think we're ever going to get over it.
I hope we do. I hope we can work towards functional
I'd
zero.
love,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't want to. I'm just saying let's be real. I don't know if we ever will. And it's also, so let's get into the homelessness.
Well, do you mind if I actually touch
go
on
ahead.
one thing first? Is Rutland. What kept, a lot of people here, a lot of people in Kelowna, they look at Rutland kind of as the sore thumb of Kelowna, and I don't. I love Rutland. I'm just where I am. I own property there. I'm blessed enough to be able to own property.
I used to live in Rutland. I love Rutland.
But do you know what I think is one of the key tenets of Rutland is the type of development you've seen there. Like, there is a ton of low to mid-rise housing, and that's what kept Rutland very affordable. So one of the first condos my family purchased when we moved here for $99,000 was in Rutland, and it was in one of these, these low to mid-rise complexes.
Yep.
And I feel like if we saw more of that spread around, like let's say in the Mission, where we're already saying, well, we want to densify there, I don't believe that the infill housing we're seeing with the RU7, those fourplexes, that is, in my opinion, and I believe in practice, if you go into actually look at it statistically, it's not making a meaningful impact on inventory. But if they did low to mid-rise housing, that would add significantly more units.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I think RU7 has its place.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has its place. I'm concerned. Because
then you get a diversity of housing too, because some of those complexes, those condos, those low to mid-rise units in Rutland, you'll go, there are bachelor suites, but then you also have 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, and that's, I think Rutland was really a good example, and why it's actually one of the fastest growing communities for young families is because there's a lot more affordable housing options.
I think low to mid-rise housing. I think you find that there's more low to mid-rise housing being planned for than you're aware of.
And that's what I'd love to see more of that than the RU7
and I think you're going to see
stuff.
there's more coming down the pipe. I don't disagree to some degree that we're catering to the RU7 and other zones are catering towards a more high-end.
Well, because they know it'll get purchased, because like you said, there is a demand for more expensive inventory for sure.
I'm sorry, but when it boils right down to it, developers are not in the game of developing to lose money.
Well, and that's where the city council comes in. We have to keep, because developers, they're going to come and build in Kelowna no matter what. They want to. Everybody and their dog wants to develop here because there's such huge demand. But that's where city council comes in, where we can keep them in line. That's one of the main reasons why I want to look at the zoning, because we can, if we said, hey, this RU7 zoning hasn't been effective, we want to look at low to mid-rise housing, then developers aren't going to go away, where they're just going to have to work within our parameters.
And yet, if you talk to the developer, they tell you we're not fair to them.
I know, actually,
that's true.
There's one other quick thing before I touch on homelessness. Can we talk about this? I've had a few conversations with developers, and development fees came up, and they said we should be doing a per square foot versus a per door fee type of structure, because and honestly, this might get a little bit too complicated for some people because they don't really want to delve into it. But the way I see it is, because I was told per door fees will reduce their incentive to build multiple units, like a lower mid-rise, and they said per square foot makes more sense. I don't really buy into that 100%. I think that it is more fair to go per square foot, but I believe that also, if we do, the way I see it is that makes it easier for developers to build sky rises than low to mid-rise if we went per square foot. So I would argue that we would want a per square foot, and we would want to make some variants for low to mid-rise wood frame construction, so that it's more accessible for developers to build low to mid-rise wood frame construction than it is for them to build sky rises, or than it is for them to build fourplexes, for instance. What do you like? And I don't want to get too much into it, but
I'm going to be blunt.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
I would have to sit down and talk to a developer or two and to staff or two and hear from both sides.
Yeah.
Which is the best way to go, because they're going to both give you their side.
And that's true.
And then weigh it out. And so, in fairness, Daniel, I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to that, because I haven't specifically asked that question.
I understand, yeah.
And so I'm not trying to dodge it. I'm just trying to say I'm not going to wing out an answer to you, because...
And I appreciate that. I really appreciate that, because I just recently have been talking and learning about this myself. Yeah. I didn't know about it before this campaign.
Great question, and it's a great question, and it hasn't come to my attention quite like you put it out. Quite often we listen, but I don't know.
Understood.
I'd have to ask.
So in that case, if we could spend a little bit of time, do a pivot into homelessness.
Sure.
And the reason why I want to do that, car alarm going off, there we go, somebody got it. So the reason why I want to do a little pivot in homelessness is because that's been a huge issue that's been coming up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And affordability to me is definitely key. But I think one of the things that we need to do, and I know there's a whole host of issues when it comes to homelessness, but I think one of the things I want to bring up is the rail trail and
Which do you want to do first? Do you want to do homelessness or do you want to do rail trail?
Homelessness first. Actually, I'm sorry. You're right. Thanks for keeping me in line.
We'll never get this thing done.
So when it comes to homelessness, I know there's a host of issues, but more than half of the people that I talk to have simply been priced out of the market. And so what I want to talk about is how do we tackle the affordability issue for people who have simply been priced out of the market. They're willing, they're able, they're on welfare or work part-time minimum wage jobs where, like, let's be honest, that it doesn't afford them.
Well, yeah. Okay, so let me answer.
Yes, absolutely.
First of all, we do not control the mortgage rate.
That's true, yeah.
And it's not council that's eliminating people from kicking them out of their homes or having people lose their houses. It's lack of jobs, it's mortgage rates escalating, it's all other things that are the cause and effect of homelessness. I don't think the City of Kelowna is responsible for homelessness. We're responsible to try and solve it, but we are the ones that have created the problem. So that being said, the number one source to resolve homelessness, as far as I'm concerned, is our provincial and federal governments who have the ability to create incentives, to provide incentives and what's the word I'm looking for? Financing.
Yeah.
Towards first homeowners getting back into the market, loans, that sort of thing. We can't do that. What we can do, though, is help separate the problem. And I think here's my issue quite quickly. We talk about homelessness to people. Most people, or right now, when we talk about homeless in Kelowna, are lumping what's going on the street and saying that's our homeless issue. There are actually 4 things that are going on the street. We have our mentally ill, we have our drug addicted, we have our true homeless, and we have our criminal element. What we have to do is separate the 4. Federal government and provincial government have to get on top of mental health. We need to have facilities and institutions where those with mental illness and compromised systems are properly looked after and housed and helped. Yeah. These people are not capable of helping themselves. They need help. Long gone are the days of the old institutions and prisons. We need proper medically staffed, safe houses for our mentally ill. Bar out. We need proper, effective blend of addiction recovery homes and long-term components of that. Getting someone off of drugs for 90 days or alcohol for 90 days and onto the street does not do anything. You need a compendium of care. You need a long process to get people back in society and working and functioning. Again, federal and provincial government largely at the helm of that. We can help out by providing facilities or land or contributing different things, but when it comes right down to the financing and funding and all the regulations and guidelines, that's the provincial government and to some degree the federal government. So if the federal government and the provincial government get on top of really properly assisting with, and they're starting to, some good news I think has happened today, and I haven't heard it, but I heard that there's going to be a press conference right about now.
Oh, I hope
a
it's
big
good
one,
news, yeah.
A really big one, with mental housing and addictions. If we can get on top of that, that's huge, Daniel, because what that then does is it separates, or will help to eventually separate, the drug addicted and the mentally ill off the street and separate them from the criminal element and the homeless, the truly homeless. When I'm talking about the truly homeless, we're talking about the people you were talking about who lost their homes, can't
just
get a home.
Just price right out,
whatever, okay? So now we can look at the street and say, now when we talk about homeless, we're actually talking about homeless, not a blend of all 4, okay? And Now we can deal with the homeless, and there we can then, that's where Journey Home and housing societies and the city can effectively try and roll up the sleeves and say, okay, now we know we've got 30 homeless, not 80. We've got 30 real homeless people. Let's or 40 or whatever that number is, and then we can really get to town and working on them. The criminal element, therefore, now stands up like a light bulb, okay? Because the criminal element, there's a lot of it out there. A lot of what we see on that street are just lazy yahoos taking advantage of the situation in society, and they are actually bullies and pick on those on the street. There's a number of people on the street, homeless people on the street, or mentally ill, or the addicted that are terrified. They're terrified. They're being bullied and robbed and beat up all the time by lowlifes that are living on the street and feigning that they're homeless. They're not homeless, they're leeches.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. And that can only be solved when we get into the courts. The RCMP, and I'm frustrated like everyone else with the criminal element that's going on, but the RCMP have had it up to their eyeballs because
well, and their hands are tied, really.
They're taking people in the courtroom, and the door spins, and spits them right back out because there's no courts and there's no judges to handle the caseload. So it's a spinning door. We have to get more courts and more judges processing these guys, and perhaps more institutions to lock them away. But we have to start to be active, proactive against crime. That until you do that, you're never going to solve our street problem. Homelessness can be solved, but we have to separate them from what's going on. And I really think that we've been starting to do that, Daniel. And and I'll finish that comment by saying part of the reason I think we have such a glaring homelessness problem on our street, and I'm talking about the four, not just the one,
the whole
is that we have in Kelowna actually done a very good job of providing shelter and winter shelter and protection and things like the winter camps and facilities. We've done a very good job in Kelowna, and the word has got out across the country to anybody who's homeless. Where, Daniel, would you like to spend the winter? On the street in Kelowna or in Tuktoyaktuk, in Toronto, in Flin Flon. I know if it's winter and I'm going to have to spend the day on the street, I know where I'm going to go. It's going to be Kelowna. It's going to be Victoria. It's going to be where it's warm. And so, not only are we climatically attractive, but we also have a lot of amenities here, a lot more amenities here than you'll find in other municipalities. So, in a twisted way, we become our own worst enemy because we've done such a good job. We're drawing in more and more homeless from other parts of the country. So
there's a couple of things I want to say and touch on there.
Okay.
Thank you so much for highlighting a few of these issues.
Well, my view on it. May not be the only one. But.
Absolutely. So the way I want to just there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. One is going to be the city, because you're right, the province and the federal government, mental health and healthcare is a huge component. Like, that is a provincial component, and that needs funding from the federal government. And I completely understand. All the city can do is advocate for that. I understand that, and we should be, we should continue to advocate for that. And the province, we need them here. But when it comes to housing and what the city is able to do, one of the things, and I'm going to touch on the rail trail really quickly too, is one of the things is, we're spending $35,000 a month on this rail trail, and that's housing 35 to 50 people are coming in there and setting up camp, and that money is going towards bylaw and RCMP officers coming in every day, telling people to tear down their tents and put the tents back up. And then we also send contracted cleaners out there, and then on a weekly basis, all the residents, the homeless people that live there, have to bring all their tents to the one area so that the gravel could be leveled out and put back, and then they go and set their tents back up. When I look at that, I think, well, it would be a lot more effective if the City of Kelowna was working with, say, the province, with BC Housing, working with some of these other institutions, and not spending, we don't have to spend another penny. That $35,000 a month, instead of going towards all of these salaries and contractors, I think that could be going towards subsidizing housing for these people that are already living on the streets, because half of the people that I've spoken to at that tent city, they're getting welfare or they're working part-time or they have an ability and they're willing to get out of that situation, but they've been priced out of the market. Half of them, yes, there is a criminal element. There's 20% of them, 20 to 30% with dissociative mental disorders where, yes, you need the province. And yes, there are about 40 to 50% where they have some serious drug abuse issues. But I know half of them are just regular people who are priced out. So I would say in terms of how the city can be helping more would be subsidized housing for people who are simply priced out of the market. Because I know that's a huge element, and I know that when we talk about homelessness,
I don't disagree.
yeah, and because like a lot of people I know, they're so close to being priced out of the market, and as soon as you get priced out, as soon as you're put on the streets, there's a trigger where you have to cope with that situation, and that's where a lot of the criminal element or the drug abuse or even the mental illness comes from. And then I feel like that's going to help a lot with
But you realize that we've been lobbied to do that.
Well, so here's what frustrates me is we got a $3.2 million grant and we're spending $35,000 a month. The City of Kelowna is on this rail trail, and what frustrates me is I feel like the City of Kelowna didn't need or doesn't need the province or the federal government to say, okay, I'm going to take this $3.2 million and we're going to start subsidized housing. That's $3.2 million they have that they were granted to work on homelessness and drug abuse. They could have done that without anybody's help. So that's
who could have done that?
Well, the City of Kelowna
Could have got $3.25 million.
Well, no. So they have the
From where?
No. What I mean is they were given a $3.2 million grant.
Right.
The City of Kelowna was, and they determined that one of the best ways to spend this money
Right.
was to spend $35,000
Right.
a month on this rail
Right.
trail,
Yeah.
and I think that was a bad decision.
Well, so who would you have deal with the rail trail situation?
Well, I think the rail trail situation, we would have been more successful using that money, that $35,000 a month, would have gone a lot further and helped a lot more people if we put that towards subsidized housing.
And what about the rail? What about the people that are out the rail for trails?
Well, so that are living on the tent city right now?
Yeah.
That, I believe
They'd
we
still
could
be
have.
there, Daniel.
Well, I
They'd
don't
still,
believe.
oh, yeah. Oh,
So this is what
no, you're not, I don't think, sorry. I don't
Yeah.
think you're in touch with the reality of it.
Well, here's the thing.
No, the bottom line is
Yeah.
there are those people out there that no matter what you offered them, they're not going to do it. They're not going to go.
Well, and here's the thing: I understand that. I agree that there are people with dissociative mental disorders. 100%. We
Oh,
know
more
it's a
than
provincial
that, more
health
than that. The criminal
issue.
element.
Well, and there is that criminal element,
Yeah.
but like you've acknowledged, and you know that the criminal element preys on the vulnerable, right?
Absolutely.
And so when people who are simply, like I said, half of the people on the rail trail right now, that tent city, if I went there and I offered them housing for $400 to $600, even $700 a month, some of them have enough of an income that they can move into that housing. So if we took 50% of the people out of that tent city rail trail, so that's the people who are simply priced out of it, not only are we going to see a massive drop in crime because they're not going to be preyed on the same by the criminal element that's preying on the vulnerable.
So I would suggest to you that because we can go on forever. And,
That's true.
I would suggest to you that, and I would have to look into it again. The $35,000 breakdown. There's so much stuff that we do with it. It's a number that I'd have to look at, and talk to staff and say, what about what Daniel says? Because again.
Well, and I also know they're doing the best. I know that it's not like people are nefarious.
Let me finish. I would suggest that you were saying 50% would jump at it. I would suggest it's far less than that. Those people, serious homeless people that are at the rails for trails, I would say it's probably 25-30%. Okay. 30%. I don't know. I'm not even about to guess, really.
Well,
but
so I actually did a walkthrough, right? I did a protest. I went through. I talked to, more than 80% of the residents there.
Okay. Let me.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead. Yeah.
I would suggest that it's
that's far less.
There's a fair amount of those, Daniel, that no matter how much you try and help those with homeless, the rest are still going to be there, and they're going to be a problem. They are a problem, and so we have to deal with them. Bylaw has to deal with them. Police should deal with them.
It should be more effective, yes.
Dealing with them. But there are those out there who are just not going. They're not going to leave the rails for tourists. Daniel, I was an addict. You once an addict, always an addict. So I'm still an addict. I know how addicts think. And most addicts do not want to be around other people. They do not want to have to comply to guidelines. They do not want to have to live in a strata building or have to deal with rules. They don't deal well with rules. So living, believe it or not, in the elements, on their own, out there like that, intense, suits them to a large degree, sadly enough, just fine. Okay? They don't know, a lot of them are just unfortunately so wired and so addicted that they're really, life does not function on the same level as it does for you and I. And so a sad reality is no matter how hard you try to help some people, they don't want your help. I think the Rails for Trails is an issue. It's a problem. It's a beautiful facility. Unfortunately, it is distracted from. But I'm not convinced necessarily that amount, that 35,000 of it you're claiming is being spent on bylaw. I don't know how that's the case. I take your word for it. But bylaws needed to be involved at the Rails for Trails.
Oh, the way it's set up right now, yeah, no, you would need.
You have to.
Well, because you can't send one
and
person
you
by
can't just send
themselves.
bylaw out for free. So the bylaw has to get paid somehow, somewhere.
Yeah. Well, the way
and,
it's set up right now, yes. And that's why I would argue trying to do it differently.
So I guess right now the bottom line is no one wants them at Rails for Trails, but it's a reality of what we're dealing with. And if it's not Rails for Trails, it's somewhere else. We are going to have people camped out on the streets until we can finally get to the point where we actually have housing for all, which would be ideal goal.
That would
be the ideal goal, and we all want that. But until that point, there's going to be somewhere, and we have a legal responsibility, whether we like it or not. Until the law says that until we can provide housing for all people without a home, they're allowed to be in our parks, they're allowed to be on our streets, they're allowed to be on our doorsteps. And that is just how it is.
Well, on public property, yeah. So can I just really touch on, thanks for sharing. And personally, I've also had, I've got a unique perspective, I think, as well on homelessness and drug abuse because, two of my best friends both passed away from drug abuse. I was homeless myself when I was younger.
Yep.
Was kicked out of the house when I was 16. There's this whole element to my life that's completely different than what I am now.
Shows.
Yeah.
The passion is there.
Thank you kindly.
I get that.
Yeah.
And good for you for being
trying to. Yeah.
Well, great on.
So one of the things that I think ultimately what I want to advocate for is opening up as much of the housing that we can.
Right.
So subsidized housing, helping encourage developers to build more low to mid-rise housing to help temper the inventory. Because once we've done that, if we've done our job, I don't think we're there yet, but if we have enough available subsidized affordable housing as well as more low to mid-rise housing to help bring the market down a little bit, I think once we've done that, then I would say we would need to be a lot stronger on enforcement because I think rehabilitation is necessary and key because there are people who want to rehabilitate and get back into society. But for those, and there's so many people I know myself as well where, they wanted it, they needed it, and there was a point of their life where it broke and it needed to happen, right? Yeah. But of course there is a criminal element where I would say that's where enforcement comes in. So once we have the rehabilitation and the housing, well then we need to come down hard and fast on the criminal element and lock them up. And I know this community court system that was advocated for. I think it's going to be great for some of the repeat offenders who want to be a part of society. But I believe that there's that criminal element where we need them to be locked up and they need to be put away.
The criminal court case system is really for new offenders and young ones coming into the market to try and keep them from coming back. As far as your hardcore offender, that's where we need more courts.
Well, we do, and we need, and those hardcore offenders, they need.
Might I say, perhaps no one wants to go there. Mm-hmm. More prisons.
100. Well,
if you haven't got room for them, where do you put them? And Our society is chaotic. It's got chaotic, and yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're being forced to play hardball.
Absolutely. Well, because I think the criminal element, 100%, I'd play hardball every day. And anybody who knows me, I engage with the homeless community quite a bit here in Kelowna. And there are going to be some who they know me. We've been in physical altercations. Like people have attacked me. People have, there are the criminal element who's not going to have, like they know that I'm really hard on that side of homelessness and drug abuse. But I know that the people who are simply priced out, or the people who are struggling and want to get back in, they know that I'm going to do everything in my power to help them get back into society.
Being priced out in Kelowna is a hard one to get back.
It really is, yeah.
I've had friends who sold their homes to move away to other towns and then tried to come back. And I said, once you're out, it's really hard to get back.
It sure is. Like, we're blessed to be able to own property
we're
here.
Totally blessed. And that's why I'm so thankful to be in Kelowna and thankful to be in council, because I recognize how lucky we are to live in Kelowna, how blessed we are to live here, and how that's why, as far as I'm concerned, I owe. It's my job to try and make this a better place for other people.
Absolutely.
That's what it is.
And Charlie, I feel like I've kept you for a long time. Is there anything you want? I know there's so much more we can talk about. Is there anything you feel like we should talk about or that we missed before I wrap things up? Because I know there's a lot more I wanted to talk about, but I feel like I've kept you here for a long time.
Well, we've probably spent too much time on too many same topics.
Yeah.
Well, I think really what it boils right down to is that, this Kelowna, our community for the last 2.5 years, like the rest of the world, has been just beaten down with COVID.
Yeah.
I've lost a couple of friends from the COVID. I've lost a couple of friends from addictions. These are not been easy couple of years, and I will say it's been very difficult 4 years for council.
Yes.
I don't think any of us anticipated. None of us anticipated.
I don't think
COVID,
anybody could
of course,
have. No.
But on top of all the homelessness and the criminal element, it's been a very, very hard 4 years, especially the last year or two. And as much as I'm seen as a lone wolf, and I'm usually the voice I'm the only one sometimes yelling in the wind.
The dissenter, yeah.
But, I will say that this council's taken a lot on the chin that perhaps it didn't deserve. I don't like the high rises, I don't like a lot of the stuff, but when it comes to the homelessness and the street issues, I think this council's worked really hard.
They're trying their best,
to do their best with it. I think Kelowna has taken a pounding, much like the rest of the country, but with the homelessness added on top of the COVID, it's been a really rough 4 years, and I'm hoping that Kelowna is coming out of that now. I know that the predictions are that COVID's on the way back, and I sure hope it isn't, but I think it is. But I guess what I want to say to people is, whether I get in or don't get in, I'm hoping that Kelowna can try and find tolerance again. Try and find a kinder, softer, gentle side again. What I loved about my Kelowna was I always thought it was a warm and friendly community. And it seems like the last year or two that it's just got negative. And so I guess I'm just hoping that we can spend each time. I wake up every day because of the health issues I've gone through, and I'm so happy to be healthy again.
Yeah.
But I wake up every day and I say thank you. Thank you for just being here. And I think I would ask Kelowna residents to do that themselves. Wake up in the morning, look at the community you live in, be thankful, and ask yourself, how can I make this a better town for me and for my family and for my neighbors? And if we all are mindful of that, I think we'll make it a better place to be.
One of my mentors in my life, and used to be a very good friend of mine, told me that I should have an attitude of gratitude. Because I used to be a very ambitious young man, and sometimes you don't look at life with an attitude of gratitude. And so I agree with that 100%. And hopefully, what I would like to do is, and the reason why I'm running is because I know that City Hall, and I know that the councillors are doing the very best that they can. I'm hoping that just by adding a diversity of opinion, by, you know, you won't be the only dissenter on City Hall if I were elected. I think if people feel like they're being heard,
Give them a vote. I need some help.
if people think they're being heard and represented, I think that'll help level out some of the hostility, because I do feel like sometimes, and especially with some of the residents I've talked to, they feel like City Hall isn't even listening to them, and so that's why, you know, I don't believe I'm going to come in and change the world. I'd love to be able to, but I hope that even just by having a little bit of a unique or different perspective and representing some of the voices here in town, I hope that would, you know, be beneficial for our political environment and beneficial for our community.
Well, Daniel, if you can come in and change the road, I'll be really ticked, because I've been trying for 14 years.
Well,
Well, you know what? There's 2
Yeah.
seats that are open.
yes, sir.
So good luck to you, and hope to see you at the finish line.